I suspect a great many of you wish that you could forget 2020, especially if you live in a part of the world where COVID-19 and the attempts to thwart the spread of the virus have made normal everyday life seem like a distant memory. To be honest, if it wasn't for the world-class content that I churn out on a routine basis on this channel, it would almost have been a lost year for most people. A reminder, should you need one, that Christmas is a time for giving and for coming together. Figuratively, of course. So, if you're feeling particularly festive, why not give the gift of a like on this video, should you enjoy it, and get together by subscribing to the People's channel and joining the HITC Sevens family, which is now universally regarded as the best community on YouTube. I know, that's a bit like being crowned the least racist KKK member, but we'll take what we can get. Anyhow, whilst you may have had a 2020 to forget, and I naturally wish you all a much happier 2021, today's video is concerned with players who have had 2020s to forget for less personal reasons. Essentially, today's video is all about the most disappointing players of this calendar year, almost like the opposite of last week's video, in which I took a look at 7 players who had surprised everyone in 2020 for all the right reasons. These are players who might have surprised you in an altogether rather different way. Here are 7 footballers who had a 2020 to forget. Felipe Anderson. Given that 2 West Ham players featured in my list of players who surprised everyone for all the right reasons in 2020 last week, I suppose it's only right that I include one who has had a year to forget. A couple of seasons ago, if you'd asked a group of football fans who was the best player at West Ham, a large number of them would probably have said Felipe Anderson. The Brazilian joined the Hammers in 2018 for a substantial fee, and he looked like the closest thing to Dimitri Payet since the Frenchman left the club. Following his impressive debut campaign, Anderson made a much slower start to last season in an ailing Hammers side under Manuel Pellegrini. Whilst a number of West Ham players had a new lease of life following the return of David Moyes in the new year though, Anderson suffered the opposite fate. On January 1st, 2020, Anderson scored West Ham's 4th goal in a 4-0 rout of Bournemouth. That was 358 days ago, and Anderson hasn't scored a single league goal and only won in any competition since. Anderson was unfortunate in some respects since he suffered a back injury later that month at around the same time that Jared Bowen joined the club. Nonetheless, the setback only ruled him out for around a month, meaning few could have anticipated such a dramatic decline. The 27-year-old joined Porto on loan at the start of this season, where he has largely looked hopeless during the first half of the season. West Ham reportedly now want rid, but from what they've seen so far, Porto have no interest in making the deal a permanent one. As things stand, following a wretched 12 months, a cloud certainly seems to be lingering over Anderson's future. Just a quick reminder that he cost West Ham United £36 million. Javier Hernandez. I might not make as many daft predictions on this channel as my colleague over at HITC Sport does, nor do I accompany them with promises of self-inflicted punishments thankfully, but it doesn't mean that I'm immune to making a fool of myself every now and then. To my mind though, and I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me otherwise if I'm mistaken, this has to be my worst prediction of 2020, and quite possibly the worst of the lot. When Javier Hernandez signed for LA Galaxy in January 2020, I thought he'd take the MLS by storm. Age 31, he was hardly over the hill, and just look at what his compatriot Carlos Vela, who has rarely been as impressive as Chicharito for the national team, has achieved at LAFC. Anyhow, I was badly wrong, so far at least, with Hernandez's goal-scoring woes having continued at Los Angeles' other MLS team. Once an instinctive goal-getter with a burst of acceleration and a sixth sense for sniffing out chances, Hernandez has looked to shadow his former self over the last few years. Brought in by LA Galaxy on a large salary, really as a replacement for Zlatan Ibrahimovic, whilst the Swede couldn't stop scoring in Los Angeles, Chicharito has only scored 2 goals in 12 games for the club, ruled out for the rest of the 2020 season due to a calf strain back in July. Somehow, I can't see him bagging 50 goals in an MLS season anytime soon. Christian Eriksen. As a long-term admirer of Christian Eriksen, I've been equally surprised as I have been disappointed by his form since signing for Inter Milan in January 2020. A wonderful midfield technician who is excellent at picking up pockets of space and either playing a pass or having a strike on goal, Eriksen had 6.5 outstanding seasons at Tottenham, where he was twice named as the club's player of the year. As I've said in the past, I thought the style of football in Serie A would suit the Dane down to the ground, but it hasn't proved to be that way just yet. And it looks likely that Eriksen won't get the opportunity to turn his fortunes around at the San Siro. He arrived in unusual circumstances, as the Serie A season was suspended due to COVID-19 within a month and a half of his arrival. Serie A may have resumed in June, but 6 months on, Eriksen might as well still be isolating. His form has not been good at Inter Milan, but in truth, it never seemed like Antonio Conte was particularly keen on him in the first place. One gets the impression that the Inter Milan hierarchy jumped at the chance to sign Eriksen for what was a cut price fee in light of his contract at Tottenham running down without actually consulting Conte himself. The Italian has never really sought to resolve Eriksen's situation or help accommodate him in his first team, instead using him sparingly as the 28-year-old's confidence slowly drains away. It has been a dreadful year for Eriksen from a footballing perspective all round, but his form for Denmark has remained excellent, and one suspects he's simply too good not to turn things around once he leaves Inter Milan, and I noticed that at the time of this recording, there are even reports of interest from Arsenal. Amin Arit. Rewind 12 months, and things were looking pretty rosy for young Moroccan international midfielder Amin Arit. Having won the Bundesliga's Rookie of the Year award in the 2017-18 season, the former non-star continued his rise in 2019, particularly in the tail end of the year. Schalke made a strong start to the campaign under new boss David Wagner, and Arit was without doubt the team's most creative force in midfield. Capable of playing out wide on the left, but happiest playing in the number 10 position, Arit is a skillful and exciting flair player who can beat a man and turn a game on its head. That's exactly what he was doing at the back end of 2019, even winning the Bundesliga Player of the Month award for September. That seems like a distant memory now for both Schalke and Arit, who have suffered a fairly steep fall from grace. I have covered Schalke's decline in a recent video as part of my What on Earth is Going On series, but Arit's demise has been just as drastic. As results dropped off during the second half of last season, Arit remained briefly one of Schalke's better players. However, particularly this season, the proverbial has really hit the fan. Not only did Arit's performances drop off a cliff, he's only actually made 7 appearances for Schalke this season, and he was recently dropped from the first team and told to train with the youth team until his attitude improves. Eden Hazard. I think you could make a good case for Eden Hazard having been the Premier League's Player of the Decade for the years from 2010 through to 2020 if such an award existed, and he's no doubt been among the most gifted players of his generation. Fantastic on the ball, capable of beating players at will, and able to score and create a hatful of goals at his best, we saw the best of Hazard on numerous occasions at Chelsea. In his final game for the Blues, he put on an absolute masterclass against Arsenal in the 2019 Europa League final. But in truth, we have seen nothing close to that level of performance from him at Real Madrid. Having been signed by Los Blancos for an enormous club record fee, despite being in his late 20s, Hazard is yet to justify that price tag in the Spanish capital. We must acknowledge, of course, that Hazard has had his injury troubles in Madrid. He was ruled out for the first couple of months of 2020 due to a microfracture in his right ankle, an injury that recurred during a 1-0 defeat to Levante. In the end, the Belgian went under the knife, meaning he missed 3 months of football, which included some of Real's biggest games of last season. A disrupted start may be able to explain Hazard's patchy form for Los Blancos, but even when he has been able to get a run of games, he looks a shadow of the match winner that we saw at Stamford Bridge. It's been a similar story this season, with Hazard catching COVID at the start of November before suffering a muscle injury, which ruled him out for the rest of 2020. In the 15 or so games that Hazard has played in 2020, he has looked woefully out of sorts, and regrettably, I think he has to feature in this 7. Mesut Ozil. There is some semblance of order to this 7, which is why Mesut Ozil comes very close to top spot. Given the immense talent that Ozil has at his disposal, and how joyous he can be to watch when he's really at the races, it should come as a disappointment to all football fans, not just Arsenal fans, that we're no longer getting to see any of that in action. In truth, Ozil did not come into 2020 in fantastic form. He had already cut quite a controversial figure at the Emirates for a couple of seasons, but there are still few who have fallen further this year. He only made sporadic appearances at the start of 2020 under new boss Mikel Arteta, ending the season having made the fewest appearances in a season for him personally since the 2007-08 campaign. Things went from bad to worse at the start of this season, however, with Ozil left out of Arteta's first few matchday squads and eventually excluded from Arsenal's Premier League and Europa League 23-man squads altogether. Given that Ozil has already retired from international football, it means he is now playing no competitive football whatsoever. Plenty of you have asked me to make videos about why Ozil isn't playing, but in truth, I don't know any more than you do. Some have speculated that it could be related to the comments he made about China's human rights abuses in Xinjiang, whilst others suggest it is more likely due to his poor work ethic conflicting with the ethos that Arteta wants to implement at the Emirates. Whatever it is, Ozil has had a truly dreadful 2020. Kepa Arrizabalaga. I mean, what can you say about Kepa Arrizabalaga in 2020? I don't want to pile on the misery, it isn't in my nature, but it has been seriously bad for the Spaniard. Put it this way, if you've had a worse 2020 than someone who's no longer even included in their team's registered squad, something has gone horribly wrong. It would be fair to say that Arrizabalaga didn't have a flawless 2019, making a flutter of errors, and very famously, or infamously, refusing to be substituted against Manchester City in the EFL Cup final. Despite the odd mishap though, there were undoubtedly some signs of promise, and one ought not forget that David De Gea struggled during his debut campaign in English football as well. Whereas De Gea kicked on in his second season at Old Trafford though, Kepa has suffered the opposite fate at Stamford Bridge. His form collapsed towards the back end of 2019 into the start of 2020, leading to Frank Lampard dropping him in favour of Willy Caballero, a man who is so old that before signing for Chelsea, he actually fought in the Argentine War of Independence. With his confidence in tatters, Kepa looked like an accident waiting to happen whenever he returned to first-team duty, and in the summer, Chelsea had to take evasive action. Despite having forked out close to £72 million on Arrizabalaga, making him the most expensive goalkeeper on the planet, they replaced him with the £22 million acquisition of Edouard Mendy in the summer just gone, and Kepa's future at the Bridge now appears to be deeply uncertain. All round, Kepa's 2020 is rivalled in terms of badness only by some bloke in Wuhan who ate a dodgy bat, and even he must have looked at some of Kepa's gaps this year and thought, that poor bloke just can't catch a break. Or the ball. Anyhow, that's just about it from me, although honourable mentions go to the likes of Antoine Griezmann, Luka Jovic, Jesse Lingard, Granit Xhaka, Jordan Pickford, Dele Alli, Nicola Pepe, Divock Origi, Matt Ryan, and many more. Thank you all for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. And you can also find me on Twitter or Instagram, and follow me on either platform via the username @HITC Sevens should you wish to do so.